The young man uttered his first question. Am I already dead? A few minutes ago, he had just jumped in front of an out-of-control truck to save a little girl. But now he found himself in a place that looked like heaven, facing a woman with wings and a dog. The woman, with a calm demeanor, replied, Not yet. Time has currently stopped, but your death is imminent. His name was Jinguji Joe, 21 years old, a recent graduate of the National Defense Academy of Japan. He recalled the moment he dashed out to save the little girl from a dump truck that ran a red light, thinking he had really died and gone to heaven. But the truth turned out to be different. The woman explained that time had been temporarily stopped and she was speaking directly to his soul. To Jinguji's surprise, she introduced herself as what, in his world, would be called a god, leaving the young soldier astonished. She stated that she was one of the managers of space and time, and revealed that she had sent one of her servants to his world in the form of a dog to expand her knowledge of the human world. The god servant was supposed to have been protecting the little girl, but got distracted by a butterfly, causing the dog to lose focus and lead the girl astray into the street, which resulted in the accident that involved Jinguji. The goddess bowed her head and apologized to him for this carelessness, and seeing him still standing motionless, she explained that it was normal to be in shock after learning he had died due to a god's mistake. In reality, Jinguji's military discipline had kicked in, and he recognized that before him stood a superior officer to all of humanity. Therefore, he stood silently and listened, not daring to move. After apologizing once more, the goddess was reminded by her dog that time was running out. Extending her hand, the goddess made an offer to atone for her mistake. Jinguji, would you like me to reincarnate you? In the palm of her hand, an image of a globe and a human figure appeared, symbolizing the new world in his body. She explained that she would copy his body, soul, and memories, and then transfer them to another world that she managed. However, she warned that there was very little time left. The goddess explained that once time started moving again, she would be unable to copy his living body, and she could not delay any longer. Not wanting Jinguji to die such a pointless death, she pleaded, Will you accept my offer? Jinguji took a deep breath and asked if it was possible to be reincarnated back into his own world. The goddess regretfully replied that once a death has been confirmed, it cannot be reversed in the same world. This was beyond her authority. Understanding the situation, he went on to ask if there was any way for him to communicate with his friends or family after being reincarnated. The goddess explained that this was also impossible, as he would be sent to a completely different world where he would never meet anyone from his old world again. Hearing this, Jinguji swallowed hard, thinking of his family before accepting her answer. He asked one final question, whether the little girl he saved would survive thanks to his sacrifice. Surprised by such a humane question, the goddess calmly replied that the little girl would escape unharmed and without any injuries, all thanks to his sacrifice. Upon hearing this, a smile appeared on Jinguji's face. He saluted the goddess in military fashion, then requested to be reincarnated into the new world. The goddess thanked him for accepting her offer, and, to help him survive in this unfamiliar world, she bestowed upon him a blessing and a special ability. Before reincarnating him, she told him to remember carefully what she was about to say. When he awoke, Jinguji found himself standing on a stone-paved road amidst dilapidated ruins, in front of a small shrine dedicated to the goddess who had sent him there. Looking down at his hands, he was surprised that everything seemed unchanged. His body was just as it was before. Is this really a copy of my body? He wondered, feeling as if he had just been transported to another location. Scanning the surrounding forest, he felt the gaze of something watching him from the bushes. Seeing a small path cutting through the forest, he hoped it would lead him to a nearby village. The goddess's words echoed in his mind, and he concluded that he would need a weapon to get through this forest. Holding his hand out in front of him, Jinguji was surprised when a 5.56mm Type 89 rifle materialized before his eyes. The goddess had granted Jinguji the storage ability, allowing him to store and summon objects at will without any limits. In addition, she had provided him with the equipment he would have received before his sudden death. It was the standard equipment of the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force, the kit he would have been issued upon receiving his assignment. Jinguji quickly put on the combat uniform, tightened his bootlaces, attached the bayonet to his rifle, and put on his helmet. After getting fully equipped, he gave a solemn salute to the goddess, grateful that she had given him a new chance in this world. With the rifle in his hand, he started down the stone-paved road, heading toward the strange world he would now explore. As he walked through ruins and forests, images from his past life flashed through his mind. He remembered the moment he was asked why he joined the self-defense force, and his answer was simple yet full of meaning. I want to become someone who protects people's lives. A protector of the innocent. Jinguji believed that becoming a member of the self-defense force would allow him to save more lives. That thought motivated him to overcome every challenge during his training. He felt satisfied that he had acted quickly to save a life in his old world, and had no regrets even though it led to his own death. But for him, that still wasn't enough. He knew that no matter where he was, no matter how many times he was reborn, he could always do it. Protect those who needed protecting. Jinguji's train of thought was cut short when he saw light filtering through the canopy ahead. He realized he was about to leave the forest. Just then, a scream rang out, causing him to immediately run toward the sound. In a clearing in the forest, a girl with rabbit ears was staring in terror at the giant creature before her. The monster was tearing apart the carcass of a horse it had just killed. Paralyzed by fear, she stood motionless, hoping the monster wouldn't notice her. Her companions who were fleeing noticed she was still there, and tried to shout for the girl named Belle to get up quickly. However, the blood from a scrape on Belle's knee had already caught the monster's attention. It began to approach, sniffing and tasting the air from a close distance. And just as the monster was about to grab Belle, her companion feared he wouldn't make it in time to save her, while Belle squeezed her eyes shut, awaiting her death. Suddenly, two of the monster's fingers were shot clean off, sending blood spraying everywhere. Belle and the swordsman were stunned by this sudden turn of events. The monster hadn't even had a chance to look at its wound, when another bullet struck it right in the head, felling it instantly. The rabbit girl turned around in shock and saw Jinguji kneeling beside her, asking if she was okay, and holding out a hand to help her up. But before Belle could take his hand, she screamed a warning as the monster rose again, its eyes glowing red. Reacting quickly, Jinguji gripped his rifle and plunged the bayonet straight into the monster's eye. Seeing this giant creature attacking an innocent person, he wondered what kind of world this was. But in the end, it didn't matter. His mission was clear: protect the girl. He gave Belle a reassuring smile, then turned to face the wounded monster. Realizing a few bullets weren't enough to take it down, Jinguji switched his rifle's firing mode to full auto. Raising the gun to eye level, his gaze filled with the determination to discover his true potential in this world. He pulled the trigger, unleashing a hail of bullets into the monster, finally bringing it down for good. When he looked up, he spotted two more creatures crawling out of the woods, realizing the monster hadn't been alone. Don't underestimate the Type 89, he thought to himself, raising his rifle and taking aim at the new enemies. This time, a full auto burst to the head brought the first monster of the group down. Only one remained, but it was faster than he'd expected. In the blink of an eye, the creature leapt into the air, preparing to strike from above with its weapon. Jinguji realized with horror that he wouldn't be able to take aim in time. Just as danger closed in, the monster was struck in the flank by an arrow and its neck was slashed by a long sword. Turning around, Jinguji saw that Belle's companions had arrived to help, with the swordsman loudly telling him to repeat his attack. I can speak Japanese, Jinguji thought to himself, recalling how the goddess had explained his ability to communicate in this world. He immediately aimed his weapon straight at the monster's head, and Jinguji pulled the trigger, unloading the entire magazine into the target. With the last monster down and the extermination mission complete, he lowered his gun and thought to himself, this really is a bizarre world. Wiping the blood trickling down his cheek, he turned to the woman beside him and saw her stammering her thanks. It was only then, with the danger past, that Jinguji noticed she had rabbit ears. Before he could react, he was slapped hard on the back by the swordsman, who was utterly amazed by what he called exploding magic. The swordsman continued to slap Jinguji's shoulder enthusiastically. From a nearby carriage, a voice called out to the swordsman Gilbert, asking if it was safe to come out. The swordsman quickly confirmed it was, telling the man named Antonio that he could come out now. Antonio emerged carefully, his eyes full of gratitude as he looked at Jinguji, and called him an extraordinary mage for single-handedly defeating so many ogres. He thanked Jinguji for saving his life and introduced himself as a merchant. At this point, Jinguji began to realize this world was like something out of a fantasy story. He introduced himself to Antonio as Jinguji Joe. However, the name Jinguji seemed strange to the merchant. When Jinguji explained that Joe was his first name and Jinguji was his family name, the group immediately dropped to their knees. Antonio bowed his head and apologized, asking if he was a nobleman from another country, understanding the situation he was in. Jinguji quickly reassured Antonio, telling him he didn't need to kneel and affirming that he probably wasn't a noble. To avoid trouble, he pretended to have amnesia, saying he couldn't remember who he was. Gilbert, the swordsman with the group, asked with concern if Jinguji had come through the lost forest to the north. When he enthusiastically confirmed this, Gilbert immediately declared Jinguji to be a stray, causing the group to look at him with pity. They concluded that passing through the lost forest must have caused his amnesia, and were amazed he had survived coming out of it. Believing his story, the group was convinced Jinguji was in trouble and kindly invited him to travel with them to the city, as a way to repay him for saving their lives. Antonio wanted to reward Jinguji properly once they returned to the city. With that decided, the party continued their journey. Along the way, Antonio explained the details of this world. It was a fantasy world, just like in games and novels, with magic, monsters, and a culture and social structure similar to medieval Europe. The world consisted of walled merchant cities that functioned as economic hubs, where the inhabitants belonged to organizations called guilds. For example, the free city of Siveni was governed by a standing council, composed of representatives from the church, the garrison, and the production, merchant, and adventurer guilds. However, other guilds like the Mercenary Guild had no voice on the council. Antonio explained that Gilbert and Hannah, members of the Adventurers Guild, had formed an escort party to protect him, a merchant from the Merchants Guild, during his trade of goods. Despite losing a horse and a cargo wagon, Antonio considered the situation a blessing in disguise because the party had acquired 3 ogres. Jinguji was surprised to learn that the ogres he'd defeated were actually very valuable in this world. Here, monsters were disassembled and reused for materials, with ogre hide being used to craft armor. Since powerful monsters were typically hard to defeat, a large creature like an ogre could be sold for a considerable price. Antonio didn't hesitate to offer to buy all 3 ogres, much to the adventurer's astonishment. A single ogre was enough for someone to live comfortably for a year, and in a single moment, Jinguji had become very wealthy. The carriage shook on the bumpy road, causing Belle to lean into Jinguji and accidentally touch him with her rabbit ears. She immediately blushed with embarrassment, while Jinguji was amazed to discover her ears were real. Antonio laughed at his reaction, suggesting that he must have also forgotten about the existence of beast folk in this world. He told Belle to introduce herself. Bowing her head in thanks, Belle formally introduced herself as Antonio's servant, her cheeks blushing as she greeted Jinguji. Her outfit and rabbit ears instantly reminded Jinguji of the bunny ear waitresses in Akihabara's cafes. Startled by meeting a real beast person and finding Belle incredibly cute, Jinguji struggled to contain his emotions and politely greeted her. Antonio, curious, asked if he could ask Jinguji a few questions. He had noticed Jinguji's strange attire, particularly the pattern and the material it was made from. As a merchant, Antonio couldn't hide his interest in Jinguji's equipment, but Jinguji was well aware that the people of this world wouldn't be able to comprehend the military technology from his world. Not wanting to draw too much attention, he fell back on his amnesia story. Jinguji calmly explained that the pattern on his clothes was called camouflage, citing his hazy memory as the reason he couldn't provide more information. When Antonio showed interest in his helmet, Jinguji gave some basic information to avoid more complicated questions. Antonio then asked to hold Jinguji's rifle, believing it to be a magic wand. Following military procedure, Jinguji detached the bayonet, removed the magazine, and pulled the charging handle to make the rifle safe before handing it to Antonio. He hoped the man wouldn't ask too many questions. Antonio was surprised to realize that what he thought was a magic wand was actually made of iron, and he was particularly impressed by its weight. He remarked that it was the most exquisite wand he had ever seen, then wondered what it would take to own one. Antonio's curiosity made Jinguji a little nervous, but fortunately Antonio quickly returned the weapon and apologized for his forwardness. Antonio slapped his forehead and explained that he had a habit of getting excited whenever he encountered strange items not found on the market. With a slightly embarrassed look, he apologized again. And Jinguji privately noted that Antonio seemed like a good person, perhaps the type one would call likable. Eventually, Antonio's questions continued late into the night. When the group stopped in a forest clearing to make camp, Antonio assigned Belle the task of preparing the meal. He took out a pouch with strange symbols on it and placed it on a makeshift table. From the small pouch, he pulled out a large quantity of food, supplies, and dishes, and he quickly deduced that the inventory ability seemed to be a common type of magical tool in this world. It was an expensive item that only the owner could use and was essential for travelers. This made Jinguji feel more natural about taking things from his own inventory. Jinguji felt like he was in heaven, being served delicious food by an adorable maid with bunny ears. Belle, sitting next to him, blushed shyly. He was grateful to be invited to eat with his new companions, even though he had only just met them by chance a short while ago. But Jinguji quickly decided he couldn't just be on the receiving end. Jinguji turned to Antonio and offered to share some of his own food supplies. He explained that thanks to a goddess's blessing, he could retrieve food from his inventory every day, as it could replenish itself with items from his previous world. However, this didn't apply to items from the new world. Thanks to this, he could resupply his ammunition and food daily. When Jinguji pulled a series of food cans, specifically Type 1 combat rations, from his bag, Antonio and Gilbert stared at him in disbelief. Jinguji explained that the cans contained food, and that he just needed a can opener and to boil the cans for 30 minutes to heat them. Once that was done, he opened the cans, which contained 3 portions of rice and 3 side dishes, along with 3 cans of takwan, which were pickled daikon radishes. Jinguji invited his companions to eat, and they looked at the food with surprise, as if they had never seen rice or takwan before. The 3 of them carefully took their first bite, and paused, astonished by how delicious the food was. With his military habit, Jinguji finished his meal quickly, watching his companions enjoy the canned food he had prepared, and he smiled with satisfaction. He felt tired after his first day exploring this new world, his gaze fixed on the starry sky. Meanwhile, Antonio was shocked to learn the canned food had a shelf life of up to 2 years. He excitedly asked Jinguji how to make it, but their conversation was cut short by the appearance of the free city of Savini. The city was like a fortress, surrounded by thick walls with a few heavily guarded gates. A long line of cargo carts was queued up, waiting for their goods and identification to be checked before being allowed to enter. Jinguji started to worry because he had no identification and wondered if he would be denied entry. When it was their turn, Gilbert recognized the officer on duty and happily greeted her, calling her Amanda. After a bit of banter, he announced their special cargo: 3 ogres, which surprised the female officer. Gilbert laughed, enjoying her shocked reaction when she heard that Jinguji had taken down all 3 ogres by himself. After the cargo inspection was complete, their party moved on to the identification check. Gilbert took a tag from around his neck for verification, and Amanda quickly confirmed his identity as an adventurer. Next, it was Antonio's turn. Trying his luck, Jinguji also pulled out his JSDF, Japan Self-Defense Forces, dog tag. To his surprise, Amanda checked it and then confirmed his identity, welcoming him into the city. Once inside, Gilbert remarked that Jinguji was a metal rank, which wasn't surprising after seeing him use what they called explosion magic. When Jinguji asked more about this, Gilbert assumed it was due to his amnesia, and explained that guild members were ranked based on their abilities and achievements, with metal tags reserved for those who reached a certain tier. After hearing about the corresponding ranks in their army, Jinguji realized that both Gilbert and Antonio were his superiors. He also realized the goddess had promoted him 2 ranks, from Sergeant First Class to Second Lieutenant, as part of her blessing. Afterward, the group split up, each going their separate ways. The adventurers returned to the Adventurers Guild to report their completed mission, while Jinguji accompanied Antonio to the Merchants Guild. Entering the Merchants Guild, they were greeted by 2 beautiful women. Antonio introduced Jinguji as his guest, and the 2 women politely asked Jinguji not to use any weapons inside the building. However, Jinguji's mind was completely captivated by their beauty. Having spent most of his time at the National Defense Academy of Japan, he had rarely encountered women, so their presence left him with almost no immunity to their charms. As Belle left to prepare some tea, Jinguji was led to Antonio's office and offered a seat. Observing the room's luxury, he concluded that Antonio must be a very important figure. Just then, there was a knock on the door. A beautiful elf woman entered, asking after Antonio with a worried expression. Antonio reassured her, explaining that while his life had indeed been in danger, Jinguji had skillfully eliminated all 3 goblins. The elf stared intently at Jinguji, seemingly still wary of him. Strangely, her appraising gaze only made Jinguji more attracted to her. He was lost in these thoughts, until Belle entered with a tea tray. Immediately, the elf went over and hugged Belle, causing Jinguji's female interaction meter to max out. The elf then asked Belle if Jinguji was the one who had saved her. When Belle confirmed it, she turned and apologized for not introducing herself, stating her name was Eldra, vice president of the Savini Merchants Guild, and revealed that Antonio was the president. Jinguji was stunned, realizing the extent of Antonio's influence, whom he compared to a general, and also understood that Antonio had deliberately kept his status from him. After the introductions, Antonio opened a drawer and took out an identification slate, similar to the one Amanda had used at the city gate, to check the origin of Jinguji's military tag. The results showed that the tag was registered in the nation of Azuma, which Eldra explained was an island nation located in the far east of the continent, out in the middle of the ocean. Upon hearing the name Azuma and seeing Jinguji's appearance, she couldn't help but be reminded of the hero Kojiro from the last Great War 80 years ago. According to Eldra, at that time, the Demon Lord and his army of monsters had launched a war of aggression against the other races of the continent. When all seemed lost, the hero Kojiro appeared and aided the weakened resistance forces in defeating the Demon Lord's army, using strange military weapons to achieve victory. After the war, Kojiro left to find his way back to his homeland and founded the nation of Azuma. Eldra pointed out that, from what she had heard, Jinguji bore a strong resemblance to Kojiro. Inwardly, Jinguji admitted to himself that it all sounded a lot like his Japan, and if this had happened 80 years ago, then the hero Kojiro must have been summoned straight out of World War II. In the end, Antonio couldn't find any more information about Jinguji, but Eldra believed that the people in the elf village might know more about the hero Kojiro and the nation of Azuma. She promised to contact them and find out, and Jinguji readily agreed, eager to learn more about the hero and his Azuma origins. Afterward, Belle left to attend to her duties, and Antonio invited Jinguji to lunch. They arrived at a luxurious restaurant, where Antonio was greeted with reverence, and the group was led to a private room for more privacy. During the meal, Antonio offered Jinguji a glass of wine, and true to his military training, Jinguji accepted immediately. They raised their glasses to toast a safe journey home. Suddenly, a booming voice called out Antonio's name, and the door burst open. An elderly dwarf appeared, clearly furious, demanding Antonio explain why he had been pulled away from his work. Jinguji realized this world had dwarves, just as it had elves. When the dwarf eyed Jinguji suspiciously and asked who he was, Jinguji responded politely, extending his hand for a handshake. But the dwarf angrily slapped his hand away, saying he had no time for such formalities. Dwarves are really cantankerous, Jinguji thought to himself, witnessing the harsh reaction. Antonio laughed, greeting the dwarf as Tendar, and then explained Jinguji's story. What a straightforward fellow, Jinguji thought, as Tendar apologized for his behavior after learning Jinguji was a lost one. Antonio revealed that the reason he had summoned the head of the production guild was to introduce him to the canned food Jinguji had shared. Jinguji immediately handed Tendar a sample can. Antonio spoke of the food's long shelf life, and then asked Tendar if he could create something similar. Tendar accepted the challenge instantly, snatching the can from Jinguji's hand with excitement. Antonio ordered more wine, and as the food was being served, Jinguji explained the basic process of canning to tender. He mentioned how this method helps reduce bacterial growth in preserved food. Not being an expert on the subject, Jinguji couldn't answer Tendar's questions about how to remove the air from the can, causing the dwarf to angrily slam an empty wine bottle on the table. Tendar attributed this gap in knowledge to Jinguji's amnesia and remarked that he must have gone through a lot. He pointed his piece of beef directly at Jinguji, urging him to eat up. What a kind dwarf, Jinguji thought to himself, witnessing this energetic display of empathy. Jinguji began to cut the meat before him and savored his first taste of fresh meat since he was reincarnated. He paused to appreciate the flavor of the beef, along with the rich sauce infused with the flavors of vegetables. Looking at the dish and the can before him, an idea suddenly sparked in Jinguji's mind, and in the minds of his companions as well. Each of them thought about canning a piece of steak. After finishing his steak, along with a few more bottles of wine, Tendar wiped his mouth and stood up, declaring it was time to return to his forge. While Antonio suggested they meet again at the Merchants Guild to further discuss the canning project, a still surprised Jinguji thought to himself, "He eats even faster than I do," as he watched Tendar leave his seat. But his attention was quickly diverted when he saw Tendar pull a watch from his cloak. Recognizing the value of the artifact, Eldra confirmed that Jinguji was indeed connected to Kujito. She revealed that this watch had been passed down from the hero Kujito after the war. The device allowed dwarves and elves who perceive time differently from other races to work together effectively. During that era, Tendar had even made a copy of this watch. Kujito not only shaped the war through his personal strength, but also through strategy and standardization. He established units of measurement for weight and length in the world, completely changing how its civilizations operated. At the Merchants Guild, Tendar returned to meet with Antonio and Jinguji, and intently watched the cans of food being boiled. He commented that this method of heating was truly clever. Jinguji revealed that these cans contained the curry he never got to try before his reincarnation. He further explained that it was usually eaten with white rice. Antonio, though he had never seen anything like it, was drawn in by the food's appealing aroma, while Eldra was surprised by the curry's unfamiliar brown color. When the food was served, the two guildmasters immediately tried the spicy dish and seemed to enjoy it immensely. However, Eldra was still hesitant because of the curry's muddy appearance. Finally, with some hesitation, she took a bite. Seeing this, Jinguji anxiously asked her what she thought. Her face flushed. Eldra admitted that the taste couldn't be described in a single word, and her answer left Jinguji more satisfied than ever. After the meal, Antonio and Tender continued their lively discussion about what food to cook first. Jinguji reasoned that they should start with the heat treatment method, as vacuum sealing equipment would probably be very difficult to replicate in this world. Just then, Belle entered the room and whispered something to Antonio. Antonio explained that the Adventurers Guild had summoned him immediately. Though concerned, Antonio quickly ended the meeting and asked Jinguji to accompany him on a mission to the Adventurers Guild. There, they were warmly welcomed by Gilbert, and Tendar had tagged along as well. However, a crowd was gathering, their eyes all fixed on a barbarian who was shouting in Albert's face. Gilbert's older brother and the master of the Adventurers Guild. Upon seeing Jinguji, the barbarian turned and called him a braggart, declaring there was no way he believed Jinguji could have taken down 3 ogres by himself. Those who had witnessed the battle quickly confirmed Jinguji's story. In a fit of rage, he slammed his shield on the floor, introducing himself as Goliath, nicknamed the Ironclad, a C-rank adventurer. He shouted that even he, with all his combat experience, couldn't defeat a single ogre alone, so there was no way a young man like Jinguji could. Jinguji wasn't sure if the man was overconfident or subtly admitting his own weakness, but he realized he had inadvertently offended someone of a higher rank. At Tendar's suggestion, Goliath decided to test Jinguji and led everyone to an arena. There, the barbarian brought his armor, sword, and his famous shield. He leaned the shield against a wooden barrel, while Tendar prepared to fire a fireball at it. The fireball exploded on impact, but the shield remained unscathed. Goliath proudly boasted that his ironclad shield could repel any attack, leaving the crowd in awe. Tendar, with a curious gaze, had to admit the shield's impressive strength. However, he asked Jinguji if he wanted to apologize and back down from the challenge, but Jinguji flatly refused. His military instincts kicking in, Jinguji began his preparations. He lay down on the ground, deployed his rifle's bipod, and took aim at the shield. Seeing this, a bewildered Goliath shouted, "Tendar, what is he doing?" Tendar was already covering his ears tightly, explaining that Jinguji had given a warning before using what they called explosion magic. Jinguji held his rifle steady, focused his aim, and pulled the trigger, kicking up a large cloud of dust around the target. As the dust began to settle, Goliath stood there, stunned, and the entire crowd was speechless with astonishment. His ironclad shield spun for a moment before clattering to the ground. Riddled with bullet holes, Goliath was at a loss for words, while Tendar casually remarked that Jinguji was right not to hit the target head-on, as even the breastplate and the wooden barrel behind it had been pierced. Jinguji gave a faint smile, set his rifle aside, and inserted a new magazine, while the crowd erupted in applause at the impressive display. They were all convinced of his extraordinary power. Goliath, for his part, sighed in regret over his shield, but Tendar came over and clapped him on the shoulder comfortingly, telling him he should bring it to his forge for repairs. However, Tendar didn't forget to warn him that the cost would be steep. Turning to Jinguji, Tendar couldn't hide his admiration, praising his explosion magic. Surprised by Tendar's understanding, Jinguji speculated that since the dwarf owned a watch, he might also know about Kojiro's equipment. These dwarves are a crafty bunch, Jinguji thought to himself, as Tendar agreed to keep calling his rifle explosion magic, on the condition that Jinguji tell him his whole story. Jinguji's train of thought was interrupted by Albert, Gilbert's brother, who, just like his sibling, immediately slapped him hard on the back and repeatedly praised his explosion magic. Eldra turned and told Belle to let her ears down, and as soon as she did, the Beast Girl noticed a female adventurer named Anne rushing into the arena, looking frantic, panting for breath, Anne reported that a serious problem had occurred near the northern village. A wyvern, a ferocious species of dragon, had appeared near her hometown. Jinguji also sensed the danger in this announcement. Anne confirmed that a messenger from the village had come to the guild to report the incident. Anne then turned to Jinguji, begging him to go to her village immediately and use his explosion magic to destroy the wyvern. Jinguji remained calm, while Albert asked the girl to compose herself, then turned to ask the crowd to send someone to the guild to dispatch the guards. While Tendar explained to Jinguji about wyverns, it's the smallest type of dragon, capable of flying at incredible speeds with scales as hard as steel. But the most worrying thing is that they have a taste for human flesh. Albert immediately began organizing a subjugation team, recruiting all available metal rankers and leather rank mages to join. Looking at his destroyed equipment, Goliath offered to borrow new gear from the guild so he could join the team. Jinguji apologized for destroying his shield, but Goliath admitted it was his fault for starting everything, and affirmed that he would be counting on Jinguji in the upcoming battle. Under Albert's command, the subjugation team was quickly formed, the adventurers responding to the emergency with almost military-like efficiency. The guildmaster noted that the fastest way to the northern village was by horse along the city's main road. Anne desperately urged the team to set out immediately via the main road, but Albert cautiously reminded her that the sun had already set. Even the city road is teeming with monsters at night, making travel dangerous even on horseback. With no safe route, they decided to leave early the next morning. Anne was devastated, her hands clenched in frustration, as she remembered her village being attacked by a wyvern before. The painful memories of her brother and friends being eaten made her determined not to let it happen again. Seeing Anne's desperation, Jinguji stepped forward and told Albert and Gilbert that he would go on ahead to the village. He insisted he could run faster than a horse, even in the dead of night. This statement made Gilbert doubt its feasibility, but at the city gate, Antonio told Jinguji he was looking forward to seeing what tricks he had up his sleeve. Appearing from behind, wearing a helmet, Gilbert praised Jinguji as a truly extraordinary mage who could use his explosion magic to save the village. When asked about her attire, Belle explained that Jinguji had asked her to be his guide and lent her the helmet in preparation for riding the iron horse they were about to use. Hearing this, Gilbert exclaimed in surprise, "An iron horse!" But just then, Jinguji appeared, declaring, "I'll get there before anyone else and protect everyone in the village." He was riding a Japan Self-Defense Forces Kawasaki KLX 250 motorcycle, speeding down the dark road. Meanwhile, on a watchtower in the northern village, a spear-wielding guard was on watch. Upon seeing a strange light approaching from the city road, a comrade asked, "Is that the wyvern?" But the guard pointed to the light and said it was something strange approaching at a low altitude. At that moment, Jinguji and Anne had arrived at village chief Loth's house to be briefed on the situation. He reported that 6 people had already been killed by the wyvern, and that the monster only attacked at dawn, causing the villagers to lose sleep for the past 2 nights out of fear. Noticing Anne trembling, Jinguji gently tapped her helmet, reassuring her that everything would be all right before asking the village chief for more information about the monster. Standing on the watchtower, Jinguji scanned the horizon for any sign of the wyvern, with Anne by his side. After a moment of silence, he broke the tension by suggesting they have dinner and take turns on watch to ensure they remained alert for when the monster appeared. Anne protested, but her rumbling stomach betrayed her words. A moment later, Jinguji handed her a tray of hot katsudon. Thanks to the goddess, his inventory didn't just contain equipment from the Japan Self-Defense Force, but also the personal items he had with him before he died, including the katsudon he had just bought. Even though she'd never tried this dish before, Anne commented that it was very good. After she calmed down, she began to tell Jinguji her story. Anne explained that her parents had died when she was very young, leaving her and her brother to fend for themselves in the village. After her brother passed away, she decided to become an adventurer. The bow she carried once belonged to her brother, and she wanted to use it to slay the wyvern as a way to find closure for her grief. Leaning against Jinguji, she thanked him for listening and helping her remember her brother. Talking so much made her feel relieved, and she fell asleep without even realizing it. As dawn broke, she was woken by Jinguji, who warned her that the wyvern was approaching. The two of them quickly put their plan into action. The monster circled over the village, turning back when it heard a loud explosion below. Jinguji was waiting in the village square, his rifle already loaded. As the monster swooped down to attack, he recalled the information stating that wyverns usually attack in a straight line, aiming for the wings, the part not covered by tough scales. He pulled the trigger. The bullets pierced through, damaging the wings, causing the wyvern to fall to the ground. The monster got to its feet, roaring in pain and anger, while Jinguji stood firm, despite the wind from the wyvern's wings blasting back at him. As the monster tried to fly up, a sharp arrow from Anne's bow shot straight into its eye. Seizing the opportunity, Jinguji quickly fired a grenade from his rifle, aiming straight at the monster's head. The powerful explosion ended it all, and the wyvern collapsed, motionless. When Anne opened her eyes, she saw Jinguji standing proudly over the monster's corpse, his face full of pride. The loud explosion had startled her, but the victory was decided. Not long after, members of the Adventurers Guild also arrived. They had set off from Svenny just before dawn and taken the shortest route to get there. Dwarves are so selfish, Jinguji thought to himself, as he saw Tendar scowling for not making it in time to kill the monster. Goliath stared at the wyvern's corpse, and Jinguji approached, handing him a few scales he had collected from the monster. "To fix your shield," he said. This unexpected gesture made Goliath extremely happy. It seemed to have been Tendar's idea. Meanwhile, Gilbert was praising Anne's role in the battle. He said that if his brother approved, she absolutely deserved to be promoted to Leather Ranker for this achievement. Jinguji, without hesitation, offered to be her witness, even giving her the helmet he had lent her as an early present. Anne, a bit flustered, accepted it with some embarrassment. That evening, Jinguji returned to Svenny and was invited by Antonio to stay at his house to show his gratitude for defeating the wyvern, having grown used to night shifts since his reincarnation. Jinguji was very grateful to sleep in a comfortable room where he could truly rest. While he was relaxing, Belle knocked on his door, announcing that the bath was ready. Leading him to the bathroom, she guided him into the large, warm, steamy space. Soaking in the warm water, Jinguji contemplated his current situation. He was in a world teeming with monsters, yet it was strange how his GSADF gear worked flawlessly. He never imagined he'd still be able to protect someone, even after death, and wondered if a woman from his past life felt the same way when she sacrificed herself to protect someone. Lost in thought, he was suddenly pulled back to reality. When Belle entered, wrapped only in a towel, and offered to wash his back for him. Jinguji was torn between the desire to have a beautiful bunny maid take care of him and a nagging feeling that this wasn't right. He remained silent as Belle washed his back, but thought to himself that he shouldn't have let her do this. When he caught a pleasant scent that wasn't soap, he had to use every last bit of his willpower to grab the washcloth and tell Belle he could handle it himself. Back in his bed, he recounted the exciting day and quickly drifted off to sleep. In his dream, a girl from his past named Hitomi told him he had done well, causing tears to stream down his cheeks. Several days passed, and Jinguji had been staying at Antonio's house as a guest ever since the wyvern attack. While walking down the hall, he ran into the merchant's two wives, a shock to him since polygamy was common in this world, and not just for Antonio. He and Belle exchanged an awkward greeting before continuing on their way. Today, they headed to the production guild together to check on the progress of the canning project Antonio had asked him to assist with. Before they left, Antonio suggested he take Belle along to help. At Tendar's workshop, Jinguji was amazed to see that the sample can he'd given the dwarf had been perfectly replicated. Tendar praised the Khan's clever sealing mechanism, popping open a bottle of liquor to celebrate. Dwarves sure work fast, Jinguji thought, as he listened to Tendar describe how they'd tested the can by adding food, using heat to draw the air out, and then sealing it to create a vacuum. Turning to face Jinguji, Tendar made it clear he hadn't done all this work for free. In response, the soldier quickly handed over his well-earned reward. Shortly after, Tendar crashed the scout motorcycle into a wall. "I'm still getting the hang of it," the dwarf explained. Tendar had taken a real liking to the bike and would pester Jinguji to borrow it every time he saw it, but each attempt ended in a crash. Despite this, he was always unharmed thanks to his race's sturdy physique. The crashes weren't an issue since Jinguji could just summon a new bike every day from his constantly replenishing inventory. When Anne showed up and greeted him, she happily showed off her new ID card, which was made from wyvern hide and scales. She revealed that she had officially been promoted to Leather Ranker. The ID card was Tendar's handiwork, but the grumpy dwarf was quick to remind her she hadn't paid for it yet. Fearing the cost would be too high, she hesitantly asked if she could pay for it later, and Tendar agreed. What a strange bunch dwarves are, Jinguji thought to himself, realizing Tendar had no intention of making her pay and was simply teasing her. Belle asked Anne if she had shown the director her ID card yet, and when Anne replied that she was just about to head over, she invited both Belle and Jinguji to come with her. They arrived at an orphanage, the very place where both Belle and Anne had grown up. It was run by the church and overseen by its director, Bishop Margaret. As they entered, Bishop Margaret unexpectedly bowed deeply in reverence upon seeing Jinguji, refusing to rise despite his repeated requests. Her words left Jinguji stunned. "Welcome to this humble world, apostle of the goddess." She explained that she could see the goddess's divine protection and blessing upon Jinguji, making him the first person to receive both since the hero Kojiro's time. She gestured behind him, and Jinguji turned to witness a grand spectacle, much like one from Russia's military cathedral. Kojiro leading the charge against the demon army, riding atop a Japanese Type 89 tank from World War II, with beastmen manning other tanks right behind him. Seeing this, Jinguji instantly deduced that the hero Kojiro must have also received the inventory blessing, just like him, and realized they had much in common. He wished he knew more about the man. After discovering Jinguji was an apostle, Anne and Belle grew tense, their anxiety palpable to him, as if he were emitting a mysterious, unapproachable aura. To break the tension, he invited them both to eat, using the opportunity to congratulate Anne on her promotion and insisting that he would pay. Anne led the group to an eatery she knew well, where she greeted the chef, Marduk, like an old friend. Jinguji was surprised to see that a teppanyaki grill existed in this world. And he was even more surprised when Marduk immediately recognized him by the nickname Explosion Joe, named after his famous explosion magic. He found the nickname quite embarrassing, but didn't protest. Marduk enthusiastically made a special dish for Jinguji, preparing an okonomiyaki pancake. Jinguji was shocked that this dish appeared here, and was even more astonished to see Anne cut the pancake Kansai style, making him wonder if this too was a legacy from the hero Kojiro. While he was lost in thought, Belle noticed and asked what was wrong, but just then, screams echoed from nearby. Jinguji turned to see a young man glaring at a large man who stood before him. With an air of arrogance, the large man drew his sword. Ignoring his subordinates' reminder that they were in the city, he pointed his sword at the young man on the ground, declaring he would be forgiven if he just apologized. The mercenary raised his sword, ready to strike down the blue-haired young man. Without warning, Jinguji fired a warning shot near the attacker's feet with his Sig Sauer P220, then raised the gun to aim directly at him, demanding he drop his sword. The mercenary shot Jinguji a hostile glare, but his attention was immediately drawn to the crater in the paving stone by his foot, where the bullet had just landed. His men recognized this man as Explosion Joe, which made the officer reconsider the situation. He chose to sheath his sword back down and leave with his men. Jinguji noticed the blue-haired young man was about to give chase, but he quickly grabbed his wrist and asked if he was all right. The young man, trembling, pointed toward Marduk's food stall and declared that the smell is irresistible. Before devouring an okonomiyaki, seeing this, Jinguji realized the young man was on the verge of collapsing from starvation and invited him to eat his fill. Belle watched in amazement as the young man devoured one pancake after another, while Marduk wondered how long it had been since he had last eaten. The young man revealed he hadn't eaten anything for 2 days. The blue-haired young man, his stomach full, thanked Jinguji for saving him. He introduced himself as Locke, from a village to the south. Locke promised to repay Jinguji one day and then departed, a look of relief on his face now that his stomach was full. Meanwhile, Jinguji wondered if that mercenary officer was also someone from another world like himself, and Anne guessed that he was a mercenary, based on rumors about an influx of mercenaries from Fort Tars, west of Siveni. Unlike Siveni, which was dominated by the merchant and adventurers guilds, Tars was the domain of the mercenary guild. Jinguji remembered how Locke had lunged at the officer and wondered what his connection was to the mercenaries. His train of thought was interrupted when Marduk brought out a tower of okonomiyaki piled high with meat. As a reward for helping the blue-haired young man, Marduk also praised his explosion magic ability, especially the crater he had created right at the mercenary's feet. As he began to eat, a new idea sparked in Jinguji's mind. The next day, he went to the orphanage with members of the Merchants Guild and Bishop Margaret, announcing to the children that he had a gift for them. Right on schedule, Marduk and Tendar appeared, carrying the dish he had asked them to prepare, takoyaki. Antonia was incredibly excited by this new and unusual food, while Tendar blissfully enjoyed the takoyaki. Meanwhile, Crankieth, the talented blacksmith, had been asked to create a hollow iron plate with great precision. Despite having only one night, he had completed the request. Marduk, already captivated by the dish, eagerly joined in to help prepare the ingredients, including dried seaweed, mushrooms, and octopus, although Eldra was initially unenthusiastic about the creature's fearsome appearance. In the end, she couldn't resist the unique flavor of the takoyaki. Margaret thanked Jinguji for bringing them such a rare and delicious dish, while Antonio suggested turning takoyaki into an exclusive business for the orphans. This was something he and Antonio had discussed the night before. Apparently, the young people from the orphanage, like Anne, Belle, and Marduk, had faced many hardships before they could become independent. By giving the orphanage exclusive rights to produce this dish, not only would their lives improve, but it would also boost the market and create more jobs. Jinguji smiled as he watched the happy children. Belle, blushing slightly, thanked him for thinking of the orphanage. She said that he was not only strong, but also always helped others, and was very kind. Unaccustomed to being praised by a beautiful girl, Jinguji hastily replied that he was just trying to do what he could, then quickly ate the takoyaki, accidentally burning his mouth. He thought to himself that if he could help without using his powers, he would gladly do anything. However, he decided to continue training with his equipment. The next day, Jinguji, along with Anne and Belle, went to the west bank of the large river south of Sivani, ready to test out some new weapons. Checking his inventory the night before, he was surprised to find that some new equipment had appeared. It seemed that his monster slaying had upgraded his rank, and the goddess had granted him additional weapons to match his new abilities. Observing the opposite riverbank, he spotted a large rock jutting out from a cliff, and decided to test the Panzerfaust III, an anti-tank weapon. He pulled the trigger and the projectile shot straight towards the target, exploding and turning the rock into small fragments. Anne, surprised, asked if he had seen that rock. At first he thought she was referring to the target he had just destroyed, but then the girl pointed towards the river, where a rock was moving in the water, startling him as he saw 3 giant stone golems crossing the river, chasing a ship. Anne realized that if they weren't stopped, these creatures would head straight for Sivani. Immediately, Anne and Jinguji returned to Sivani and reported the situation to the Adventurers Guild and the Guard Force. To prove it, Jinguji showed the smartphone from his inventory to Amanda and Albert, both of whom were stunned to see the video footage of the stone giants chasing the ship. Albert explained that these were guardian golems, ancient artifacts that guarded the old ruins south of the city. However, not even Goliath had ever heard of them moving before. Realizing the danger these giant creatures posed, Albert immediately ordered the guards to sound the alarm. Warning bells rang out everywhere, and the people at the port were evacuated inside the city walls. Those capable of using long-range magic and long-range weapons were positioned on the ramparts to prepare to face the golems. As the port gate was slowly lowered, Jinguji asked Amanda to let him intercept the golems before they entered through the east gate. At the same time, he told Anne to monitor the golems' movements from the top of the city walls. As the giant creatures emerged from the water, Jinguji took up a position on the roof of a house overlooking the port and summoned his heavy weapons. He observed the golems chasing the same ship from before, while the crew hastily loaded something onto a cart driven by the mercenary sergeant. An unusual sound echoed, and he realized it was magical energy gathering in the head of one of the golems. Immediately after, it launched a fireball, blowing the ship to pieces. Realizing that these golems could use magical attacks, Jinguji quickly got into a fighting stance, deploying the M2 heavy machine gun on the tripod he had just summoned. A volley of .50 BMG rounds was unleashed, shattering the stone blocks, severing the arm of a golem. Without hesitation, he aimed for its head to stop it from gathering magic for an attack, then shot its leg, bringing it down. From the city walls, Gilbert and Anne watched in awe of Jinguji's skill. However, Anne quickly warned him about the 2 remaining golems that were now approaching, drawn by the sound of his shots. Without pausing, Jinguji continued to fight fiercely, quickly disabling another golem. But the final one, instead of attacking him directly, used its strength to lift the corpse of its fallen comrade and hurled it at Jinguji. He barely managed to leap off the rooftop, just before the massive stone body crashed down where he had been standing. Standing face to face with the last golem, Jinguji immediately summoned a Panzerfaust III from his item inventory, propped it on his shoulder, and fired, blowing off half of the monster's face. However, as it fell, the golem began to wildly shoot fireballs from its remaining eye, causing terrible destruction throughout the city. Suddenly, Jinguji watched in horror as a fireball hurtled straight toward Anne and the other soldiers defending the wall. Just when the situation seemed hopeless and death felt imminent, Goliath suddenly stepped in front of the despairing warriors, telling them to get back. Goliath raised his iron shield and held his ground, ready to take the full force of the fireball. With the shield Tender had reinforced with wyvern scales, he absorbed and deflected the blast with a resounding battle cry. Tender and Goliath had arrived, just in time to save the defenders on the wall. Meanwhile, Jinguji turned back to face the final golem. But upon inspection, he realized it had already stopped moving, completely devoid of life. He wondered why these monsters had been chasing the ship. Suddenly, Amanda ran up, bringing news that another golem had breached the south gate and entered the city. This golem was larger, jet black, and far more intricately crafted than the previous ones. Without a moment's delay, Jinguji sped off on his recon bike, racing along the city walls to confront the new enemy. As he caught a glimpse of the monster between buildings, he wondered if it was searching for something. He then realized it was chasing the carriage driven by the mercenary officer. The officer was whipping the reins like a madman, trying to escape the massive monster, with no idea how long it would keep chasing them. Jinguji accelerated, closing the distance between himself and the golem. He considered summoning a Panzerfaust III, but quickly realized that using such a heavy weapon inside the city would cause severe collateral damage. As he struggled to find a way to take down the golem without harming the city, Jinguji was surprised to see the monster stop as it stood before the courtyard of Margaret's orphanage. Right before his eyes, the mercenary officer had taken Belle hostage, while other soldiers were forcing the children into a carriage. Realizing the golem wouldn't attack if they used the hostages as a shield, he ordered his men to capture all the children and Belle, threatening the monster not to move. When it heard the mercenaries call the children cargo, the golem looked as if it was about to attack them. But before it could act, a giant mechanical arm suddenly slammed into its face. Jinguji had summoned a Hitachi hydraulic excavator, one specialized for disaster relief. He immediately rushed in to confront the golem in a dramatic one-on-one battle. Jinguji realized he and the golem were evenly matched in strength. Even so, from inside the cockpit, he tried to press his advantage by firing his rifle at the golem's head. However, from the awkward firing position, the shots only dealt minimal damage. As he aimed for its eyes, the golem suddenly bent down and stopped, ending the fight. Suddenly, light emanated from its body and a panel on its chest opened, revealing Locke piloting the giant machine. Locke weakly called out to Jinguji, prompting a surprised Jinguji to ask what he was doing inside the machine. Locke tried to answer but collapsed from exhaustion, causing the golem to lose power and crash to the ground. The powerful impact knocked over a nearby horse-drawn carriage, injuring one of the mercenaries. Just then, Jinguji saw several figures begin to flee from the carriage. The mercenary officer angrily kicked his injured subordinate, roaring that the slaves were escaping. Jinguji was shocked and enraged as he saw the chained children struggling to get away. A little girl suddenly turned back to look at the golem. Realizing that Locke was her brother, she cried out Locke's name and ran towards him. Locke weakly called her name, Miranda, and told her to run. But the officer quickly caught up to her, knocking her to the ground with the flat of his blade. He realized Miranda was the very target he'd been looking for. Jinguji immediately recognized the danger. He aimed his rifle at the officer, but the man quickly ordered Jinguji to throw away his magic wand if he didn't want little Miranda to get hurt. Reluctantly, Jinguji complied, tossing the rifle aside. The officer realized Locke couldn't move even if he wanted to. Locke, with all his remaining strength, screamed desperately for the man to get away from his sister. But the officer gritted his teeth in anger, cursing Locke for interfering with his business. In a fit of rage, he raised his sword, preparing to strike Miranda down in front of Locke. But just as the blade was about to fall, one of the other slave children wrapped their chains around the sword's hilt, yanking it back and shouting for Miranda to run. The officer quickly grabbed the slave girl by the hair and tried to cut her down. But the blade suddenly shattered against a glowing defensive shield that protected the girl. Seizing the opportunity model, Jinguji quickly drew the handgun at his side and fired. Disarming the officer, he warned him not to make another move. Defeated, the mercenary cursed in despair. As Amanda and the city guard arrived, the guards quickly subdued the officer and his accomplices. Upon investigation, they discovered the mercenaries were from the city of Tars and belonged to an underground organization called 8 Dark, which specialized in the slave trade. These men would be put on trial by the Guild Council of the city of Saveni. The city guard carefully removed Locke from the golem, and he was finally reunited with his sister, Miranda. Fortunately, Locke's attack had caused no casualties. Although he was put on trial, he received leniency due to the special circumstances. Jinguji also expressed his desire to help him get a lighter sentence. However, Jinguji still wondered how the young man was able to control the giant golem. Turning to the girl who had saved Miranda, Jinguji gently told her not to move. As he bandaged the wound on her ankle, he praised her powerful defensive magic and thanked her for her bravery. But when he looked up, Jinguji was stunned by how much the girl resembled Hitomi, the person from his past life he could never forget. Jinguji used the iron crab excavator to clear the debris left from the destroyed southern gate, helping to speed up the reconstruction process. At his signal, Locke's golem stepped forward and gently set the new gate in place. A week passed since the attack. As a result of the trial, Locke was sentenced to supervised probation, requiring him to stay in the city of Saveni for community service. This light sentence was due to the fact that Locke was trying to save his sister and that he was still young, only 18 years old. Furthermore, Bishop Margaret sensed that Locke had been blessed by the goddess, which was what allowed him to control the golem. Miranda was surprised to learn her brother had done it without realizing, but Locke explained that he had acted in a moment of desperation. Smiling, Bishop Margaret suggested that he should learn to use his power. Standing amid the ruins of the church, everyone decided that Locke needed guidance to understand his abilities, and Jinguji was chosen to be his mentor. The two of them worked together to rebuild the city. Locke was excited to be able to help, but he still got shy whenever he noticed the young women admiring him. The people of Saveni had grown fond of the hard-working young man. The black-haired girl named Nacrian approached with a few children to see the iron crab, marveling at its immense size. While the children went inside for lunch, the girl stayed behind. Jinguji couldn't stop thinking about her uncanny resemblance to Hitomi. Nacrian later returned to give Jinguji back his scarf, thanking him for his help, but a sudden strong gust of wind blew the scarf away. Jinguji silently reached out to her but then clenched his fist, reminding himself to stay grounded. There was no way she could be Hitomi, who had died in a terrorist attack in his previous world. He was pulled from his thoughts when Belle approached and announced that everything was ready for the tour. Jinguji nodded his thanks and signaled to Locke, reminding him that they were going to see the house. As Locke's guardian, Jinguji had decided to help him become independent by getting him a house in Saveni. When Locke expressed interest, Antonio quickly began searching for suitable properties for them. Model. Nacrian then left and noticed Jinguji's eyes were on her. Belle quietly asked him if she wanted to come along. The group continued on their way to see the house, which turned out to be a large, old inn. Locke was full of excitement, eagerly suggesting they park the golem on the front lawn. Meanwhile, Jinguji was impressed with the second-floor bathroom that had a view. Belle turned to ask Nacrian what she thought of the place, but the girl just remained silent. After a moment, she embarrassedly confessed that she had demon blood, which was what gave her the power to use magic earlier. Belle gently pointed out that she was a girl too, and declared that she couldn't let the boys decide on a place to live by themselves. An opinion from a professional maid was the only thing Jinguji could think of as Belle skillfully assessed that the house was too large and difficult to manage, estimating it would require at least 3 servants to maintain, which would be quite costly. She turned to Nacrian and said that they both needed to give their opinions as well. Nacrian hesitated but agreed, then went on to point out that parking the golem in the front would block the sunlight, while putting it in the north-facing backyard would disturb the neighbors. Having agreed on that, Belle took Nacrian's hand, and the two happily headed to the next house. After going through Nacrian's rejections and visiting a few more houses, they finally reached the last property on the northern edge of the city. This was a rather modest house compared to the other places they'd seen, but it allowed them to conveniently place the golem next to the city wall without bothering anyone. With only 3 rooms, a single servant could manage the house. Meeting the group's basic requirements, they decided to stay there. Marduk and Anne showed up to help with the move-in, and before long, many others began to arrive as well. Jinguji wondered about Anne's huge luggage cart, and she explained that because she had to leave the guild's dormitory due to an age limit, Antonio had offered to let her live with him and Locke. Antonio even wrote a letter of introduction for this purpose. In exchange for taking on another housemate, Antonio would provide them with a servant, and Anne was excited to be living with Belle again. Though a bit confused at first, Jinguji quickly realized that Antonio had intentionally arranged for everyone to live together in a friendly environment where they could support and look after one another. Later, he heard that the house had originally belonged to Antonio. Jinguji deduced that the cunning merchant had deliberately shown them unsuitable houses first, knowing that Jinguji would hesitate to accept this house or Belle's help directly. So he had cleverly arranged everything to ensure things went smoothly. After the conversation at the Merchants Guild, Eldra left, leaving Jinguji and Antonio to speak privately. Antonio revealed that he had arranged all the necessary paperwork for Locke to register as a member of the Adventurers Guild, even while he was still on probation. He also agreed with Jinguji's assessment that Locke's strength was well suited for adventuring. However, Nacrian's case was more complicated. She was from the Demon Clan, and due to the effects of the last war, The world's negative perception of the demon clan was still deeply ingrained. Even if Nakrien were free, she would still find it difficult to be independent. To Jinguji's surprise, Antonio revealed that he had found a past case of a member of the demon clan being registered as a provisional adventurer. He promised to arrange all the necessary procedures with Albert to help Nakrien. With everything settled, Jinguji returned to his new home and offered Nakrien some takoyaki, thanking her for helping him choose the house. Nakrien guessed that the food was a thank you gift, but that wasn't Jinguji's intention. Getting straight to the point, he asked her if she wanted to become a provisional adventurer and join his and the others' party. Meanwhile, the roar of an engine echoed from within the forest. Anne warned Jinguji that if they went too far, they'd get lost in the middle of nowhere, but he was incredibly excited to start the training session. He drove to a secluded area, completely unaware that the rest of the party members were terrified, experiencing high speeds in a motor vehicle for the first time. The light armored car moved through the forest and came to a stop in a clearing. Immediately, Jinguji began a military-style training exercise, ordering the group out of the car. He had previously handed out camouflage uniforms to the combat members. Standing before the group, he declared that the Sivani Adventurers Guild party, the Jietai, would now begin a field exercise. He had named it Jietai in honor of the Japan Self-Defense Forces. The night before, Jinguji had raised a toast to celebrate the formation of the Jietai team, but was met with silence save for Belle's enthusiastic applause for their work in exposing the Dark Guild. Their party had been recognized by the Adventurers Guild with a high rank, but Jinguji thought everyone would be happier about it. However, Anne and Nakrien pointed out that this meant they would be taking on more difficult quests, and not everyone was as powerful as Jinguji. He immediately countered that everyone had their own skills, Anne with her incredible accuracy, Nakrien with her powerful defense magic, Locke with his giant golem, and Belle with her excellent cooking. Anne explained that people who didn't use magic, lacked good equipment, and had little experience couldn't work with someone as high-ranked as Jinguji. Nakrien added that she was once considered a failure because she only had defensive abilities and no offensive magic at all. Locke, while constantly munching on food, bluntly admitted that aside from controlling the golem, he couldn't do anything else. Meanwhile, Belle just quietly flicked her ears without saying a word. Realizing the situation was more serious than he thought, Jinguji decided to reveal a secret. Right there in the empty lot, Jinguji set up a temporary shooting range and demonstrated how to fire the gun in single-shot mode. To prove that his skill wasn't some kind of explosive magic, but the power of the weapon itself. This meant that anyone could learn to use it. He wanted them to learn how to use guns to protect themselves, preparing for the dangerous missions ahead, believing they would use them to save many lives. Jinguji started with Anne, teaching her how to aim and operate the rifle. Although her first shot missed the target, she was still amazed that she had actually fired it. Afterward, he explained the gun's internal mechanism and warned her to be careful to avoid accidents. Anne improved quickly, hitting the target with all 3 shots in 3-round burst mode. Next, he trained Nakrien. The half-demon girl was surprised to discover she had accidentally used attack magic when she hit the target. Then it was Locke's turn, who was also taught how to use the rifle. Finally, Belle was taught how to fire a handgun for self-defense, and Jinguji made a mental note to bring earplugs for her next time to reduce the noise. After using up all the ammunition and collecting the spent casings, the group took a break for lunch, and Jinguji brought out some canned food that Tendar had prepared for them to try. At first, Nakrien was just as skeptical as everyone else, but when she tasted it, she realized it was actually delicious and she couldn't get enough. Meanwhile, Anne asked about her performance. Although he just replied briefly that she did very well, in reality, Jinguji was truly impressed by her superhuman marksmanship and perfect eyesight. Jinguji's thoughts were interrupted by Belle's terrified scream. They turned to see a small slime crawling on the ground. Anne suggested that the group should hunt slimes to earn more income for the Jietai, since the magic crystals inside their bodies were very valuable. Locke and Nakrien worked together to herd the slimes into Anne's line of fire. With her excellent skill, Anne hit each of their crystals with a single shot. When Belle gave the all-clear signal, the group quickly collected the crystals and gathered them into a neat pile. Following Belle's suggestion, Anne used water to wash the crystals, which helped neutralize the slime's corrosive properties. And the adventurer was thrilled with the number of crystals they had collected. and was surprised when Jinguji gave her and the rest of the group bottles of soda from a famous off-brand. After enjoying their drinks, Jinguji decided to end the training session and head back to town. But before getting in the vehicle, Anne suddenly chased after a giant slime, ignoring Jinguji's warning that she shouldn't act alone. Nakrian immediately ran after her to stop her. Anne continued chasing the slime, oblivious to her surroundings, until the creature merged with an even larger slime, forming a gigantic monster that enveloped her. Just in the nick of time, Nakrian appeared, erecting a defensive barrier around them both, just before the slime could swallow them. Jinguji arrived immediately, noticing that Anne's rifle was dissolving inside the monster. He tried firing his own gun to rescue his comrades, but had to stop when he realized the impact from the bullets could injure the girls, and his gun wasn't powerful enough to penetrate the slime's dense body anyway. Seeing Nakrian struggling to maintain the barrier, he wondered how long it could hold. Nakrian, sensing the danger, quietly warned Anne not to talk so she could focus all her energy on maintaining the protective spell. Jinguji quickly thought of using the mechanical arm of the iron crab to rescue Anne and Nakrian before their barrier melted away. Just as he secured the barrier with the clamp, the giant slime suddenly tried to pull the entire machine inside. Unfazed, Jinguji shifted into reverse and slammed on the gas, successfully pulling both girls out to safety. Turning back to face the monster, he used the mechanical arm to search for its crystal core. With a precise clamp, he crushed the core just before the iron crab started to dissolve. Anne was remorseful for her reckless actions, and gave Jinguji the giant crystal they had just acquired. Bella praised the precious gem, while Locke recognized it as a rare treasure imbued with healing magic. Belle mentioned that Margaret from the orphanage was very knowledgeable about healing magic, and Jinguji suggested donating the crystal and the profits from the slime hunt to the church, much to Anne's dismay. Afterward, he ordered everyone to prepare to leave, storing the heavy machinery back in his inventory, but he didn't notice a small slime hiding on the vehicle's roof. When it suddenly lunged down to attack, Locke quickly pushed Jinguji aside, taking the hit for him. Margaret was praying before the goddess's altar when Jinguji appeared, carrying a gravely injured Locke, desperately pleading for help. Locke's back had been melted by the slime's attack while protecting Jinguji, leaving severe burns and missing flesh, causing him to feel a deathly chill. Miranda, Locke's younger sister, could only watch in despair. Realizing the first aid kit was insufficient, Jinguji asked Margaret to use healing magic. He suggested that the treasure they had collected might help. Although Margaret confirmed this was possible, she explained that to activate the treasure's power, a corresponding spell was needed, which was rare in Svenny. In agony, Locke began to say his goodbyes to his crying sister, but just then the treasure began to glow. Margaret realized the gem was resonating with Miranda, and sensed that the goddess had just blessed the little girl with immense healing power. Taking advantage of this miraculous gift, Margaret guided Miranda on how to channel the power, and the young girl succeeded in completely healing her brother's back. Later, Jinguji recounted this story to a noble lady, explaining that the siblings had to spend several weeks recovering from the terrifying ordeal. He pointed toward the siblings, who were now happily running down the street, food in hand, which moved the young lady to tears. Her bodyguard, Saunders, quickly offered a handkerchief for her tears, and she thanked Jinguji for telling the story. It turned out she had come to town specifically to hear this story. Anne remarked that inviting such a noble lady was a bad idea, as her carriage was drawing a lot of attention. However, the girl blushed and countered, saying she was having a wonderful time. She was Elizabeth, the daughter of a noble family from Tarsus. That morning, she had met Jinguji at Antonio's house, where her father, Lord Bunker, had come for a business meeting. It seemed Jinguji's Jeitai group had become a topic of discussion among the nobility, and the clueless soldier had casually accepted Elizabeth's invitation to talk about it over tea, even inviting his whole group along, completely oblivious to her flustered, blushing state. Anne worriedly told Belle that Jinguji didn't seem to realize Elizabeth might be intending to propose to him, but Belle just smiled, replying gently that in Jinguji's mind, the Jaitai was already his family. Just then, Marduk approached, excitedly announcing that he had successfully recreated Thai noodle soup and invited Jinguji to try it. Since the concept of noodle soup didn't exist in this world, Marduk had strived to recreate it because of his love for Southeast Asian cuisine. Marduk also invited Elizabeth to try the noodle soup, but both she and her bodyguard Saunders were at a loss, unsure how to eat it. They watched as Jinguji and Locke slurped their noodles loudly, their expressions a mix of astonishment and mild disgust. Saunders quickly raised a hand to shield his lady from the splashing broth, getting his pristine white cloak dirty in the process. He was furious, but Elizabeth quickly realized this was likely how commoners ate, and resolved to try it elegantly herself. She carefully used her chopsticks, trying to eat without making a sound or splashing. Amazingly, she finished without getting a single stain on her dress. However, disaster struck when Locke accidentally splashed soup onto her dress. Just then, Tender entered with a grim look on his face, calling Jinguji over and demanding he listen. He announced that a coup d'etat had just taken place in Tarsus. Meanwhile, Saunders stood on the walls of the Adventurers Guild, his eyes watching the unstable situation as Goliath approached to ask about Lady Elizabeth. Goliath reported that Elizabeth had calmed down, but her mother and siblings were still inside the mansion. Feeling helpless, the knight advised Goliath to put his faith in Jinguji and the Jiitai team as they were on their way to Tars at high speed. Aboard the LAV, Jinguji asked Noctian for a map of the city of Tars, while also reminding the team of their current mission. Meanwhile, at an emergency meeting of the Sveni City Council, Gilbert gave a detailed report on the coup d'etat led by the Mercenary Guild, which took advantage of Lord Bunker's absence. The rebels were looting and destroying everything in sight, while Lord Bunker's forces tried to hold them off to protect the people. The council unanimously condemned the coup and decided to send reinforcements to the anti-coup faction. At the Sivani Forces Alliance headquarters, Albert summoned the adventurers to present a plan based on military intelligence from Tars and Lord Bunker's fortress. He explained that fighting was still ongoing inside the fortress, and the most urgent mission was to quickly establish a line of communication with Lord Bunker's forces. Albert assigned the reconnaissance mission to the Jiitai team, and Jinguji announced that he had something to investigate in the city, accepting a long-range radio to stay in contact. Before the team departed, Antonio revealed to Jinguji that the carrier pigeon letter from Tars was actually sent directly by his daughter Marianne, begging him to rescue her. On the way, Jinguji informed the team that they would go to Marianne's house, rendezvous with Gilbert, then relay the information to other units before evacuating civilians and retreating. Belle was used to driving these vehicles while Anne was still trying to adapt, and Miranda was starting to get motion sickness. Meanwhile, in the city, Locke yelled at his sister, demanding she strictly follow Jinguji's instructions. Noctian realized Locke's anxiety stemmed from his knowing exactly how brutally the mercenaries behaved. She suggested that Miranda could turn back if she wanted, but the young girl adamantly refused, determined to do her best to help those who might be going through the same hell she once did. Noctian coldly accepted Miranda's resolve, but Belle quickly diffused the tense atmosphere by opening a box of rice crackers, saying that they all shared the feeling of wanting to protect someone. She suggested they have a small party with snacks and soft drinks to welcome Miranda to the Jiitai, and the young girl emotionally agreed. Belle offered a drink to Noctian, and although she initially refused, she eventually took a rice cracker. The group continued driving through the night, and while those in the back seats rested, Jinguji asked Noctian if she liked the rice crackers. She explained that they made her feel nostalgic, because the flavor was similar to a snack her mother used to make. The soldier sympathized, sharing that he felt the same way when eating food that reminded him of home. Noctian then asked Jinguji if she reminded him of someone, as she noticed he seemed both relieved and sad when he looked at her. Jinguji confirmed that she reminded him of someone who was once very important but was now gone. Jinguji wished he could have protected her, and he apologized to Noctian for looking at her strangely. Noctian replied calmly, stating that what's lost can't be brought back. But they had to do their best to help Marianne. She handed him a few rice crackers as they continued to drive. Late at night, they reached the outskirts of Tars, seeing only guards on the city walls. Noctian wondered curiously what Jinguji would do to scout the situation inside. Suddenly, he gave a signal, and they all looked up to see a drone flying by, causing the amazed team members to call it a little fairy. At Marianne's mansion, a nervous servant asked Gilbert if help was really coming. The swordsman confidently replied that they could trust the Jiitai and explosive Jinguji. All of a sudden, Jinguji's drone appeared at the window, carrying a radio. Over the radio, he contacted them, and Gilbert quickly updated him on the situation in Tars and with Marianne's family. Jinguji then laid out a plan of action for dawn. After the report was finished, Jinguji gathered the team. The group assembled to discuss the plan, but the initial plan for minimal engagement was no longer viable because Marianne's child was running a high fever. Jinguji decided there was no more time to waste. They had to launch a direct assault on the walls to reach Marianne's house as quickly as possible, so that Miranda could heal the child. Anne was worried about breaching the walls, fearing that this action could cause harm to the civilians in the town. However, Noctian coldly stated that there was no one else who could do it. Jinguji suddenly slammed his fist on the vehicle's hatch, revealing that the prisoners had been executed right there on the walls, while some guards sat around gambling with their freshly stolen loot. But not long after, a rumbling sound echoed from the forest, startling the soldiers. At first, they mistook the fireballs appearing in the sky for shooting stars. Just a few seconds later, the fireballs began to rain down, devastating the city. The main gate was blown open by precise firepower, and Jinguji ordered a ceasefire. The team quickly advanced toward the fortress in their Type 96 armored personnel carriers and Type 16 maneuver combat vehicles. They sped down the main street, heading straight for Marianne's house. The armored vehicles were immune to fire magic and arrows from the mercenaries, causing the enemy to gradually lose their will to fight. Before the rescue, Jinguji had ordered Bell to load grenades and turn the main cannon to the rear. Just then, a mage was about to collapse a watchtower onto their vehicle. Without hesitation, Anne opened fire, turning the enemy to ash. Jinguji floored the accelerator, plowing through the collapsing watchtower, determined to save everyone at any cost. Meanwhile, Marianne held her young child tightly and refused to leave their side, despite Gilbert's advice. Suddenly, Jinguji crashed right through the wall, appearing just in time to save them. Gilbert, Marianne, and the child quickly exited the house, as Jinguji ordered his team to secure the evacuees. Politely introducing himself to Marianne, Jinguji led them to the APC in a perfectly organized manner. On a nearby building, two figures watched from a distance, wondering if Jinguji was the second coming of the hero of old. Jinguji then ordered Nacrian to guide the evacuees into the vehicle. However, one of Marianne's maids stopped Nacrian, demanding to know why a member of the demon race was here. The question was cut short as mercenaries hurled intense fireballs at them, prompting Jinguji to hastily urge everyone to move faster. Miranda approached the stunned Nacrian, telling her to guide everyone onto the Type 96. With renewed resolve, Nacrian took the driver's seat, preparing to depart under a hail of fire. The convoy began to move through the precarious situation, constantly changing direction to avoid attacks from the mages. However, the mercenaries' morale held strong. They even adapted by collapsing buildings to block the path. Surprised by their swift coordination, Jinguji asked Gilbert about the mercenaries' chain of command. Gilbert admitted he didn't know, as he had been investigating the Dark Guild when the coup suddenly broke out. Gilbert further explained that the coup might have been orchestrated by the Dark Guild, but there was no direct evidence, even when tracing the flow of money. The group then sensed the presence of individuals with special abilities. Marianne's maid angrily concluded that it could only be demons, wondering how they dared to do such a thing. Marianne looked at Nacrian, her gaze a mixture of suspicion and sympathy. Nacrian lowered her head, her heart heavy with sorrow. She felt as if someone was inviting her to be part of a group, but she quickly dismissed the thought, boldly declaring to everyone in the vehicle that the JSDF would protect them. She then turned to Jinguji, saying she had a plan to break through the encirclement. The mages saw the convoy split up and, as predicted, focused on the combat vehicle as it was more conspicuous than the APC with its lights off. Nacrian asked Jinguji to create a diversion, while she used her ability to see through darkness to navigate through the night and lead everyone to the exit. They finally reunited with Jinguji on the outskirts of the city after shaking off their pursuers. At the rendezvous point, Nacrian opened the rear door of the APC for Miranda to begin treatment. Marianne's maid insisted that they should take the child to a hospital, Model, but she froze in her tracks when she witnessed Miranda's magic miraculously heal the child. Nacrian gave a faint smile seeing the baby was healthy again, and was stunned when Marianne suddenly thanked her for everything she had done. Suddenly, the maid ran a short distance and collapsed to her knees, clutching her crumbling face with both hands. The outer layer of her skin flaked away under the effects of the healing magic, revealing her true form as a member of the demon tribe. Horns and claws became visible, stunning the group. Nacrian immediately recognized the creature as a member of the ancient demon tribe. Jinguji warned Anne to be ready. While a shocked Nacrian said she believed the demon tribe had been wiped out during the ancient demon war, surprised to see they were still alive. Gilbert stepped forward, his eyes narrowing, as he realized the Dark Guild was actually run by demons, using the skin of their murder victims as disguises. The imposter confirmed it, its face contorting as if the human skin were just a piece of dried meat. Marianne turned pale, understanding that this creature had killed and eaten her real maid. The demon revealed that it had switched places with the maid the moment it saw Gilbert send a pigeon for help, just for the chance to meet Jinguji from the Jeitai in person. It smiled wickedly, thanking Jinguji for creating this opportunity, but Nacrian quickly warned him not to be provoked. Jinguji drew his handgun, coldly asking what it wanted. The demon stared at him with sharp, cold eyes, declaring that the magical tools he possessed were interesting. It asserted that he was a reincarnator sent by the goddess, and asked Jinguji if he truly knew anything about Kojiro, but he remained unfazed, coldly asking back what it would do if he really were a reincarnator. The demon gave a sinister laugh, suggesting that the goddess was deceiving him, using him for her own schemes. It then revealed that the demons were gathering reincarnators to revive the Demon King and rule the world together. The demon then made an enticing offer: join their side, to take back what had been stolen from them. But Jinguji was resolute and flatly refused. He stated that what was lost could never be regained, but he wanted the freedom to protect the people of this world. Seeing this, the demon shook its head in regret. Suddenly, the ground shook violently. A giant worm burst up from below, lunging straight for the baby. The demon spread its wings, revealing that its lower body was actually the giant, sucking mouth of the worm. It shot into the air with the screaming child in its grasp, threatening that if Jinguji moved or aimed his cannon at it, the child would die instantly. Just as the demon was about to leave and devour the child, suddenly bullets struck the demon's head and tail, causing it to fall. Nakrian lunged forward just in time, catching the baby as it fell from the sky. Jinguji looked up and saw Anne on a high tree branch, in the sniper position she had prepared before the healing even began. Jinguji raised his pistol and aimed it at the demon. Before it died, it groaned, regretting that it hadn't eaten the child sooner. Its body began to melt, the flesh and skin sloughing off to reveal the bones beneath, forming a slimy black liquid. The ground around it turned black and a foul, poisonous gas rose up. Nakrian quickly warned Jinguji to hold his breath and keep his distance. She explained that when demons die, they release a curse, and if not dealt with quickly, its corpse would poison the entire area and could even regenerate. On Nakrian's command, Miranda used her healing magic to suppress the spreading curse. But the black ooze continued to seep into the ground, destroying any living thing it touched. Miranda struggled to contain the spread, but she was running out of strength and couldn't hold on much longer. In the midst of the crisis, Jinguji scrambled to find a solution. Jinguji knew they would all be wiped out by the curse if he didn't do something. He considered using explosives to completely destroy the demon's corpse, but realized that if even a single fragment remained, the curse would continue to spread. Gilbert quickly asked if he could summon any magical tools to deal with the curse. Jinguji frantically searched through his mental inventory when an idea struck him. He ordered Miranda to fall back and approached the demon's skeleton himself. Holding his breath, Jinguji reached out and began to store the demon's corpse in his inventory. The whole team watched in astonishment as the black slime, bones, and even the curse itself gradually vanished from the scene, sucked completely into his storage space. When the process was complete, he let out a sigh of relief, confirming his theory had been correct. Thinking back, he remembered a time Belle asked him to deal with a mouse she had caught in the kitchen. At the time, Jinguji didn't want to kill it needlessly and planned to release it in the forest. However, carrying it through the city was a hassle. He thought about trying to store it in his inventory, believing that items within it wouldn't affect each other. But when he tried, he only managed to store the cage, while the mouse ran off. Through that experience, he realized that living creatures couldn't be stored in his inventory, which would hinder the transport of prisoners or important individuals. However, his hunch that a corpse could be treated like a regular item had been proven right. Gilbert slapped him on the shoulder enthusiastically, while Nakrian thought that with Jinguji around, they might actually have a fighting chance against the demon race. Belle came closer, reporting that she had just received a message from the Savani Allied forces. Surprised by the unexpected call, Jinguji asked Locke if there was a problem. Before Locke could answer, Antonio snatched the radio from his hand, insisting on speaking. It turned out the merchant had been secretly following the team using Locke's golem. He had heard they'd left Tars. When he heard Marianne report that everyone, including the child, was safe, and he could even hear the baby crying over the radio, Antonio breathed a sigh of relief. Locke continued his report, stating they had rendezvoused with the reinforcement troops after completing their reconnaissance mission. Not long after, Locke's golem appeared before the Chiatai team as they were returning in their Type 16 MCV. Anne quickly reported that once the two forces joined up, they could prepare for the night watch. However, Jinguji's mind was drifting elsewhere, constantly thinking about the demon's revelation about the existence of other reincarnated people in this world. He was fully aware of the possibility that some might have joined the Demon Lord's army. Jinguji wondered if Kojiro had also received an invitation from the Demon Lord in the past. But he was pulled back to reality when Anne frantically told him to stop the vehicle. He slammed on the brakes immediately, nearly crashing into a group of civilians. He wondered what was going on. It turned out the Allied forces had encountered a group of refugees from Tars before meeting up with them, and were providing them with food and medical aid. When the group got out of the vehicle, Marianne and her husband were immediately recognized by some of the refugees. She told them about the rescue mission and what had happened with the coup. The refugees were shocked to learn that their city had been occupied by the Demon Lord's army, something they thought was a thing of the past. They worriedly asked about Lady Elizabeth and the Bunker family. They blamed themselves for running away, leaving the Grand Duke and the Marquis behind. Watching them cry, Jinguji realized just how beloved the Bunker family was by their people. Gilbert reassured everyone, revealing that Bunker Castle was still being protected by loyal forces. He promised that the Allied forces, along with the Jietai, would rescue the Grand Duke. The crowd grew excited at the mention of the Jietai, wondering if Explosive Joe was with them. When Marianne shyly confirmed it, the entire crowd erupted in cheers, imploring the soldier to save the Grand Duke and retake the city from the Dark Guild, because they couldn't do it themselves. Belle then noticed a small girl standing timidly in the crowd. Placing a hand on the little girl's shoulder, Belle reassured the crowd that Elizabeth and the Marquis were safe in Saveni, adding that Lady Elizabeth was a good friend of the Jietai, or so. She affirmed that their group would do everything possible to protect their friends and family. The little girl turned to look at Jinguji, her eyes filled with hope. Faced with the expectations of a child, he couldn't ignore her and gave a nod of agreement. Blushing, the little girl whispered something in Belle's ear, causing her to nod in confirmation, before whispering back to Jinguji that the little girl thought he was just like the hero Kojiro from the fairy tales. Adjusting his helmet, Jinguji replied gently that he wasn't anything like a hero, but perhaps Kojiro had thought the same thing while facing the hardships in the occupied city of Tars. Meanwhile, in Tars, members of the Dark Guild were gathered with the Lord, anxiously discussing how to prepare for the arrival of the Jietai and the sorcerer, Jinguji Jo. Two ninjas watched silently from above. One of them wondered if they should report to Lord Curtis and request reinforcements. However, their conversation was cut short by a strange sound coming from outside. Looking through the window, they saw Jinguji holding a loudspeaker, standing among the Sivani allied forces and declaring that their safety would be guaranteed if they surrendered immediately. A member of the Dark Guild, who was dragging a chained slave child, began to panic, trying to contact Lord Curtis. However, his comrades remained defiant, insisting they could handle the situation themselves, and that they couldn't show any weakness, as it would do them no good when the Demon King appeared. A ninja perched above was surprised that they were still obsessed with their own interests, even at a time like this. Nevertheless, the Dark Guild member was determined to act, ordering the ninjas to take care of Jinguji with their bare hands. At first, the ninjas were silent, but then began to explain their plan. In less than a day since the Jietai's arrival, the situation had changed drastically. The besiegers had now become the besieged. They planned to use the tower's only door to set an ambush, waiting for Jinguji to lead an attack so they could strike him down. Despite knowing about the magical tools Jinguji possessed, they reasoned that physically he was no different from an ordinary human. One Dark Guild member doubted whether Jinguji would actually come, but the ninjas were confident that he would come to deal with them personally, especially after what they had done to the people of Tars. From observing the previous rescue mission, they realized that Jinguji was the type of person who would throw himself into danger just to ensure no one else got hurt. The Dark Guild members agreed to the plan, but when the man holding the chain yanked it and made a threat, a ninja drew a kunai and sliced the chain, reminding him of their power. Then, they coldly told the robed men to pay attention to the hostages, because without prisoners, Jinguji would just use his armored vehicle to level the tower. Outside, many mercenaries had voluntarily surrendered and laid down their weapons. However, no one important from the Black Society was among them. As Jinguji was preparing a plan to attack the tower, a man in exquisite armor suddenly approached him and introduced himself as Fairway Bunker, the Lord of Tars and commander of the defense force. Fairway Bunker lightly jumped onto Jinguji's vehicle, opened the hatch, and stepped inside with him. He apologized for the intrusion, expressing his wish to speak privately, while pointing out that spies everywhere had been causing them a lot of trouble. After hearing the account of the encounter with the demon in human disguise, Lord Bunker grew concerned, believing this coup held more threats than just demons. He stressed that the enemy was still operating secretly in the shadows. And according to the soldiers, there were rumors that the Black Society was associated with a group of ninjas, which surprised Jinguji, learning that this world also had ninjas. Lord Bunker worried that they would have a hard time fighting against these ninjas, as rumors suggested they were modeled after a group of assassins from the hero Kujito's homeland. However, Jinguji found it hard to believe that those connected to Kujiro would side with the Black Society. When Lord Bunker asked for his help to break into the tower using his power, Jinguji was reminded of the demon's revelation about the Black Society gathering reincarnated people. Seeing that Jinguji seemed lost in thought, Bunker misunderstood, thinking he suspected him of being a demon in disguise. To prove he was only human, Bunker drew a dagger and cut his own cheek, letting the blood flow down, showing that beneath the skin was only human flesh and blood. Lord Bunker explained that the slaves imprisoned in the tower included the children of Tars, and he didn't want to delay any longer. Sheathing his bloody dagger, he pleaded with Jinguji to help save his city and its people. Once again, Jinguji had no other choice but to agree. Not long after, the Jietai and the allied Savani forces were assembled outside the tower. Jinguji warned the defenders inside of the impending attack. He called on them to lay down their arms and open the gates and surrender. Meanwhile, a ninja was hiding at the top of a flagpole, waiting for a chance to ambush him as he passed through the gate. Some of the mercenaries considered Jinguji's offer, but others refused. Fearing punishment for the crimes they had committed, they decided to attack first. An arrow struck the Type 16 MCV, but it just bounced harmlessly off the vehicle's armor. The vehicle immediately returned fire with its main cannon, shooting directly at the flagpole where the ninja was hiding, completely destroying it and causing debris to fall on her head. Bell confirmed that the city gate had been destroyed, and Jinguji and Nakrian sped up on their motorcycles to launch a lightning-fast assault, charging straight for the tower. The archers and mages prepared to fire back, but Nakrian quickly erected a magical barrier, repelling all of their attacks, clearing the way for them to approach the breached entrance. On the way, Jinguji's eyes caught sight of a woman's hand sticking out from the rubble. Thinking they might have missed a hostage during reconnaissance, he immediately stopped the vehicle, jumped out, and ran to check. As Jinguji approached the woman, ignoring Nakrian's warning about leaving the protection of the magical barrier, he quickly realized she was wearing a ninja outfit, though she looked like an ordinary girl. Just then, an arrow shot down from an archer on the fortress wall, piercing his arm. The archer prepared to fire a second arrow, but was stopped by a warning shot from Nakrian, who immediately told Miranda to give Jinguji first aid. As the half-demon girl removed the arrow from his arm, he motioned for her to focus on treating the ninja instead of him. Suddenly, the ninja regained consciousness for a moment and whispered something in Jinguji's ear before passing out again. Nakrian rushed over in a panic, asking what had happened, but Jinguji didn't answer, quickly handing the ninja to Miranda, and then charging straight into the tower gate. Nakrian tried to stop him, telling him to wait for her defensive magic support, but he didn't stop. Miranda worriedly asked about Jinguji's wound, but their conversation was cut short as Locke drove the Type 96 APC up right behind her, reminding her to quickly get the evacuees on board. Locke reiterated that they were still on a mission and needed to uphold their responsibilities. However, Miranda protested, insisting that Jinguji had ordered them to continue the operation and that the Jietai always followed his commands. Just then, the ninja began to stir. Inside the tower, one of the members of the Dark Guild called his comrade over to talk, to prevent the ninja from being able to read their lips. He asked what they should do about the current situation. His comrade pointed out that a ninja was outside dealing with the Jietai, but this guy was more worried about what would happen next. He stressed that they couldn't let things end here before they got to meet Mr. Curtis. His comrade reassured him and pointed towards their boss, who was gleefully using magic to torture a woman chained to the wall. Her pained screams echoed throughout the room, and even the ninjas could do nothing to stop it. One of the Dark Guild members confidently asserted that even if the chains were cut, the hostage couldn't escape on her own. However, his comrade was skeptical, questioning if the ninjas would really abandon their friends who were being held hostage. Just then, a demon emerged from the shadows, viciously chewing on a victim's arm. In a cold voice, it declared that as long as they had the hostages, they could still threaten the ninjas. A slave suddenly snapped out of her silent state, screamed, and tried to run. But unfortunately, the demon's monstrous body, like a giant worm, suddenly snatched her head, swallowing her whole. The two Dark Guild members argued fiercely about the situation. While their boss was away, the remaining man was left behind, tied to the corpse of the prisoner the demon had just finished digesting. This guy began to reason that if the ninjas had abandoned their comrade, they could use this opportunity to attack the boss. However, he quickly dismissed that idea, asserting that even if that happened, nothing would change. He was confident that Jinguji's end was near. While warning his accomplice to get ready to escape, the two of them began to consider a plan to eliminate the hostage and manipulate the ninja to still come out ahead. However, their dark plan was suddenly cut short when Jinguji appeared, delivering a direct kick to their boss's face. While Anne, quick as a flash, knocked out another gang member, the boss was stunned that they were able to get past the guarded stairways. But Jinguji warned him not to underestimate the strength of those from the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force, JGSDF. As for Nakrian, thanks to Jinguji's training, she was also able to keep up with their speed and skill. However, the boss really wanted to know how they had defeated the ninja, but Jinguji simply replied, "She is not our enemy," implying that he had heard the ninja's plea for help earlier. Meanwhile, the chained woman recognized Jinguji's voice and felt a glimmer of hope, but that hope was quickly extinguished when the last member of the Dark Guild activated a magic seal, causing her excruciating pain, and ordering the remaining ninja to kill Jinguji. Earlier in a flashback, after being tortured by Lord Init, the noblewoman Sakuta used telepathy to contact the ninja clan, asking them what they knew about Jinguji. Pulling down her face covering, the ninjas reported that the Jietai were advancing on the tower and that he would come to her rescue. And just as she had predicted, Jinguji was the type of person to rush in to save someone himself, regardless of the danger. However, a black-haired ninja wondered why Sakuta wouldn't allow them to destroy the Dark Guild themselves, arguing that they didn't need the Jietai just to deal with someone like Init. But Sakuta replied that this was a tactic to test their patience, warning them not to fall into the trap. She explained that the Dark Guild and the demons could never resist playing with human hearts, and even if they took one down, there would always be a replacement lurking in the shadows. Sakuta told them not to panic. Sakuta stressed that their opportunity would only come when the Jietai appeared. And that time was now. Back in the present, the last member of the Dark Guild tried to force the ninja to obey, threatening to kill Sakuta. But Jinguji immediately warned him to release her and surrender, guaranteeing his safety if he complied. However, the man scoffed, calling Jinguji a fool. But he replied that the man had no choice but to surrender. Despite a moment's hesitation, the Dark Guild member stubbornly maintained his magic seal. Just then, Jinguji received a signal through his wireless earpiece from his teammates outside, confirming that the military operation had officially begun. The entire tower shook violently as Locke's golem climbed up its outer shell. A large rope-wrapped hand suddenly appeared through the window, revealing Anne tied securely to it. Aiming her gun at the Dark Guild member, she hit her mark, destroying the magic seal. Jinguji immediately declared the mission complete and signaled for Miranda to come inside and treat the wounded. However, the ninja seized the opportunity, lunging forward to finish off the Dark Guild member. But before she could strike, Jinguji told her to stop, leaving both the ninja and her would-be victim stunned, asking why he was sparing him. Jinguji explained that the man needed to stand trial, because the Jietai's mission wasn't just to retake Tars, but also to bring justice and put an end to the suffering the people had endured. The Dark Guild member scoffed, assuming he was just lying and that he would be tortured later. Jinguji calmly asked, "Is that why you don't trust anyone? And do all your friends think the same way?" His words made the ninja freeze, while Sakuta smiled, as if confirming that Jinguji was indeed very similar to the person she had met before. Waking up after being unconscious for a while, Sakuta found herself lying in a bed in an unfamiliar place within the city. With her keen sense of hearing, she could hear the sounds of a dinner party in the palace, where guests were celebrating the Jietai's victory, enjoying fine wine and exquisite dishes. The door to her room opened, and Belle entered carrying a tray of food, followed by the two ninjas. They immediately ran to embrace her. Surprised, Sakuta asked why they were wearing maid outfits. Blushing with embarrassment, they confessed it was Jinguji's idea, making her suspect he had improper intentions. However, Belle quickly explained that Jinguji had discussed it with Grand Duke Fairway. They agreed that having the ninjas, who were formerly held as hostages, disguise themselves as maids would help the people of Tars accept them more easily, rather than seeing them as former enemies. As Belle lifted the cover off the food tray, the ninjas encouraged Sakuta to eat, praising the food's delicious flavor and nutritional value. Sakuta thanked the ninjas and asked them to call Jinguji, as she had something to discuss with him. Meanwhile, our hero, Jinguji, was refusing the treasures offered by Grand Duke Fairway as a token of gratitude for saving the city. Anne wondered why he was refusing, thinking that if he accepted, he could become rich without having to pay taxes. She also didn't seem to care much that the Adventurers Guild would be rewarding them for their accomplishments. Approaching a specific item, Jinguji asked if he could take it. Fairway immediately agreed, despite his butler's protest that it was a Bunker family heirloom. Fairway insisted that Jinguji was the one worthy of possessing it. The item he had chosen turned out to be a paper crane, preserved in a crystal jar. Fairway explained it was a gift left by the hero, Sir Kujiro, at the end of the war against the Demon Lord. The crane symbolized a wish for peace,